Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Lore Lords. I'm here with Pat Weston.
Hello.
This is episode 14.
Turn my mic down a little bit.
It didn't go right on mine, so
okay.
as long as the stream goes, it's fine.
That's true.
14 episodes already.
I know, and it's been fun too. Like we've only had 2 weeks where we've taken it off, and like each time it was fine. It was a good thing that we did, I think, because it's good to get some re-energized. But also, I missed it too. Like last week, I was editing a few of them, and I was just kind of like, man, I'm glad I didn't have to do any research this week because I do not have the time. But
it was nice to take. It's nice to take time off. It's also it was the holidays. We were all busy going back and forth. I was out of town for a while, so
yeah. That's right. Yeah.
We some recoup time. It's now after Christmas to date where we are in the life of the world. We're about to hit 2022. We're actually on basically the last day of 2021.
Yeah, kind of.
Tomorrow's New Year's Eve, which is insane to me because it still feels like 2019 never ended.
I know. Yeah, I mean, like, well, you know what's kind of funny? I remember, just on a personal note before we get started, I remember, like, at the very end of 2019, having this feeling of, like, oh my God, 2020 is going to be my year. I'm going to make it my bitch. I'm going to kick its ass. I've got my girlfriend, dog cake. I got my friends at home. We got music. We got great music coming out. 2020 is going to be awesome. And then COVID happened, and it wasn't awesome at all. But I kept growing personally, and I hope you all had a similar experience where you all could grow, even though we were all kind of shut inside. I hope you all had good growing experiences during this time.
I actually had an extremely positive 2020, so
that's good.
For me, it's kind of weird to say, but I got a lot more money than I did before due to working overtime and getting a lot of work done, working in food industry where people in essential work. So I was just like there all the time, working a ton of extra hours, and I think it did help a little bit that I met people like you, basically, is when we met, and then meeting through Doll Cake and kind of networking and creating this now happy stream family we have.
Yeah, totally. I think that for me, that was 2020. This year was that for me. It was like really, like last year I was like, yeah, I stream, but you all are only here because we all kind of know each other. But then this year is when a lot of fucking randos started dropping in and hanging out, like Slim and
people we won't name some people.
We won't name Slim and MJ and no, but for real, like we met people from all over now, and it's just like, oh, this feels way more real now. That's why I'm looking forward to next year. I think that like this stuff, as long as we all keep at it and keep working hard at it, we can only grow from here. So I'm excited.
I think we have positive things coming towards us, which is good because there's been a lot of negative things like a worldwide pandemic. So
yeah.
It's good to change it up. I feel like it's okay to do a little bit of reminiscing and project. It's the last episode of the year.
Yeah, that's what this is for.
We started in 2020, and now this is our last 2020 episode.
Wait, it's 2021.
2021. We started in 2021, and this is our last 2021 episode. Just edit that. Edit that out. Edit that out. That never happened. Okay. I'll just pretend you did and never listen to the playback. So this episode is. I felt like it was appropriate for this this time being the last episode 2021 because it's an important subject to me. That when we started the idea of doing this was one that was kind of I wanted this to be my first episode, but I held it back.
Okay.
This is the story that got me into paranormal stuff.
Neat.
This is what got me like, oh my gosh, this is really weird. There's a lot of very strange, like it's a true story of a paranormal event in history where there is so many witnesses, so many stories that can corroborate each other. Just it's a very interesting one, and weirdly enough, not talked about a lot, not well known. I learned about this by I think I was looking at I can't remember. I think it was Something Awful back in the day, and I was reading a Something Awful post, and someone commented, "Oh, this reminds me of this," And I was, it was a fictional story. He said, "Oh, this is a fictional story, reminds me of this." And the guy who wrote the story was like, "Yeah, it's based on that." And I was like, "Well, what the hell is that?" So I looked it up and I found it. And the title of the episode that I have right now is the 66 Flap.
Yeah, I saw that and it gave me no clues.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and get into this now. The 66 Flap is a event that happened in history in the year 1966 that the South and the East Coast kind of area. And the first event of this was October 16th, 1966. So towards the end of the year, in New Jersey, on 4th Street, there was two boys, one named Martin Munov, who goes by the nickname Mouse, and James Yankides, who goes by the nickname Jimmy, which I don't feel that's a nickname. That's just your name. If it's
Right.
Jimmy is short for James. Anyway. They were outside walking somewhere doing something where they noticed there was a figure by a fence that normally is just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. The two boys had to approach the figure, and it turned around and looked at them. And it was a man, and he was over 6 feet tall. He was bald, and he was wearing this is how it was described, a metallic colored green suit.
What the fuck?
This man smiled at them with a very uncanny grin that reached almost ear to ear, and the boys got really kind of creeped out and kind of walked faster away from this man, looking back, seeing him smiling at them the whole time until he was out of sight. So, weird encounter for two young boys to see. So, they did what I wish everyone did in the paranormal encounters and went immediately to the police. And they reported this. They said they were walking on 4th Street, and this man wearing a weird green-colored suit was there, and he was smiling at them, and they were really creeped out, and they were worried, so they kind of ran away from him, and the police, of course, took it seriously when two young boys say that. Right. Went out there, couldn't find anything. There was no man in a green suit, metallic green suit, nothing.
Right.
Shortly, they went back, put feelers out in the community if anyone sees this. Nothing came of it. Shortly after, the case faded into obscurity.
Right.
And this is the beginning of the biggest UFO flaps in our history. Do you know what a UFO flap is?
I have no idea.
It's the term. It's a term for when UFOs are seen in high amounts over a period of time, is known as a flap. Like a lot of people are reporting UFO sites. Like lights are being seen every night. They usually go for a couple days.
Huh. Okay.
And this UFO flap went from 1966 to 1967. And during this time, there would be hundreds of UFO reports all across West Virginia and surrounding states. Now, obviously, this just started, we mentioned, in New Jersey, but this is going to focus on West Virginia.
Right, okay.
But today, I want to focus on one specific encounter that happened during this whole event. But we're going to go down a timeline of the whole flap, but the biggest focus is going to be on this one encounter, and then afterwards, what I think of it, what a lot of other people think of it, and what the theories are out there. Okay. And this legendary encounter is with an individual known as Indrid Cold. Have you heard of that before?
I have not.
No, almost no one has, and it's fascinating. It's so wild to me that no one knows about this, because everyone I talk to, they're like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Also, just want to put it out there, my source for most of this information is a book written by Woody Derringer in 1971 called Visitors from Lanulos, which is a very big, in-depth, very long and in-depth, boring book about these events. It's not a good read.
It's not a good read.
But it's if you like this kind of stuff, it is very interesting. It's just not written excitedly. It's written very textbook quality.
Right.
So this whole flap is pretty unknown to the masses, except for one specific part, which is very huge, and we're going to get into that next. But before that, I want to talk about how major the flap was, because when most flaps happen, there's often around 20 to 50 reports to officials, as in police or local military, the 911 calls, right?
Right.
About seeing lights in the skies. Like the Phoenix lights happened, the Los Angeles lights happened, and it was a couple days where lights kept being seen over the cities, and no one knew what they were, and there's about, on the night, a bunch of calls. This flap was so big that while sources vary, the reports go from 6 to 900. And not only were they lights in the skies, but direct descriptions of pill or cylinder-shaped metallic objects flying through the skies and landing in the fields, sighted off of West Virginia in highways, or flying above and behind cars and even getting very close to them.
You said pill-shaped?
Yes. So
there's actually been a lot of stuff.
Yes, that's what I'm going to bring up right now. There's a lot of recent Navy footage that has been released of unidentified pill-shaped UFOs.
Well, I'm sorry. It's okay. Well, okay. Aliens are here. I'm done. I'm done with fucking arguing. I'm done.
Yeah. So that's that. This was 1966 and 67. This was being talked about. The description.
Why is no one freaking out about this?
People listen to this story. This is not a lot of people know this story.
Okay, sorry, I'm excited. I'm super pumped now.
The descriptions,
nice setup, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The descriptions between people match on the same night before reports were published on TV or newspapers about this as well. So people were reporting this without knowing each other across the state. Like they were reporting the same thing the same night. A standard. I wrote this down. This is a standard flap. Step 1, sightings happen on 1 or 2 nights. Step 2, people that night report these sightings to police, local military, 911, or news outlets. Step 3, a handful of copycat calls are made the following days after the news is broken and not taken seriously because that's just what people do. And then, because it's just what they heard in the news. And then it fades away. The 1966 flap in West Virginia was not the first flap and obviously not the last because there's been plenty since then.
Sure.
But reports simply didn't stop for about a whole year. And constant sightings of crafts, lights, and figures would be made until it all suddenly stopped, and the area was seemingly left alone. But the first thing we have to talk about, I mentioned earlier, because it kind of kicks everything off.
Right.
A very famous event, or infamous event, happens at the beginning of this flap, right after the first event that I just mentioned. And normally I do like to save these big crazy ones for the end to be like, this is this, but because we're going through a timeline, it has to start here.
Right.
But again, not to focus the episode, but I'm going to go over it. So it's also important to note that the report in 1966 wasn't officially made as like, they weren't like, it's a monster, it's something paranormal, it's just a man, it's a tall man with a creepy smile. That's all they said, with a metallic green suit. But this is what the next report was. And you may start to realize what I'm talking about when I list the location. On November 15th in 1966 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallett made a police report. And this was their report. They encountered a large gray-colored creature with glowing red eyes when their car's headlights shined on its face. They claim it had a 10-foot wingspan and flew after them in their car while they drove out of town around the old World War II munitions plant known as the TNT area locally. During the next few days, there was multiple similar sightings to this report. 2 firemen reported a large bird with glowing red eyes and they shined their flashlight on it. Mason County Sheriff George Johnson commented saying these are simply sightings of a large heron. To which contractor Newell Partridge then told Johnson that he aimed a flashlight at a large creature in his nearby field and saw its eyes glow, like large bicycle reflectors.
What the fuck?
Sightings of the creature continued and the course heightened as news reports came out about it, and eventually it became so common around the plant to see the creature that news people were going there, or children were going there looking for it. And they were trying to come up with a name for it, and the first name was the Mysterious Owl Man. And then they said, well, it doesn't really look like an owl, it looks more like a bat. So they called it the Batman, to which they were replied, well, that's going to have copyright issues because this show on TV right now with Adam West is really popular, and you can't name something the Batman. And they said, okay, how about this? The Mothman.
Dun, dun, dun.
And that name is actually based off of the Batman's Rogue Gallery villain, Killer Moth.
Oh, really? That's
yeah. And so that's the start of the Mothman. And this is, of course, one of the most famous cryptids, and I do absolutely love the Mothman. Like, I have a deep love of the Mothman and his whole legend and Mothman prophecies and the legend of the Mothman, all that stuff. But that is not. That'll be a future episode. I could do a multi-part episode on the Mothman.
Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
I always thought Mothman was some kind of obscure indie superhero that I had never heard of and that everybody was super into. And I was like, man, I really got to get into this Mothman thing.
Did you not know it was like a cryptid thing?
I have no fucking idea. I never asked. I don't know. I just was like,
no, yeah, it's like a monster that people still claim to this day seeing around West Virginia, specifically Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
But okay, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and so this was the first sightings of it, and again, I'll go into that in another episode about how it's been seen since the fucking 1700s. But that's the first reported news sighting of it, and it became local news that there's a monster in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is a pretty peaceful town, right. Terrorizing people and chasing people in the woods. But we're going to be focusing a lot on one man named Woodrow Derenberger. Now, he goes by Woody, and we're going to call him Woody for the rest of this episode. And just to give a little background on Woody, he was born on September 10th, 1916 in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And after high school, he would join the U.S. Signal Corps, which is a part of the Air Force,
right,
in Tampa, Florida for 37 months before being discharged and moving back to Parkersburg.
All right.
And when he moved back to Parkersburg, he became a humble sewing machine salesman. And from what I tried to look into his job specifically, it seemed like he did have a store he worked at. Like, he worked at a store that made handmade sewing machines. And this is like very classic 1960s, like Americana style, like,
yeah, okay,
probably really good. They still work today, sewing machines kind of thing.
Yeah, they don't make them like that anymore.
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Like that kind of, they don't make them like that anymore kind of stuff. Yeah. But it also seems like he did go door to door. So he kind of was like a door-to-door salesman, but he also worked and sold stuff in the thing. Anyway, kind of relevant. What is relevant is what happened on the night of December 2nd, 1966. Woody was driving home from work on a highway when a cylindrical-shaped metal object appeared behind his truck, seemingly out of nowhere. Soon it passed him and overtook him like a car would by going around him, and then began to slow down in front of him, forcing Woody to slow down. Eventually, both of them coming to a stop. A door on the back of the craft opened up, and out walked a man. The man was described as being 6 feet tall and having a large grin going from ear to ear, with black combed back hair, wearing what was described as a metallic-colored blue suit.
No fucking way.
He approached Woody's car and looked at him through the window. Woody said that he spoke no words, but in his mind, he heard his own voice telling him to roll down the window, and so he did.
No.
The man said he would like to speak with him, and after a pause, he said, "You can speak or think your response." Woody was too scared to say anything, and shortly after he froze, and the man replied, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Derenberger. My name is Cold. Do you work for a living, or do you have to?" Woody replied, "Yes, I'm a salesman." And before he could say any more, Cold replied, "I'm a searcher. You should not be frightened. I wish you no harm, only happiness." It was at this point that he had folded his arms behind his armpits, which Woody noted were being long. His arms seemed very long, and it was raining outside, and he seemed like he was cold, so he tucked his arms in his armpits, and he asks him about Parkersburg, pointing at the city in the distance where the lights are, and if everyone lives there. That's what his question was. To which Woody replied, "It's a place of business and trade usually, and people live in suburbs." Cold responded by saying, "Oh, where I come from, we call those gatherings." And then, after a pause, he said, "Look at me. I am the same as you are. I sleep and breathe and bleed as you do. Have no fear. We mean you no harm. There is no reason to be frightened. My country is not nearly as powerful as yours. You should report this encounter to the officials. At a later date, I will come out and confirm your story."
Are you fucking kidding me? This literally sounds like the first messenger of like somebody coming down and like being like, "Oh, okay, this is amazing. How have I not heard of this story?"
No one's heard of this story. So why would you believe this guy if he said that to you? So
it's true. Well, but it's funny because you talk about this guy that these two kids saw. Like these two kids, basically said they saw this alien.
And I started with that not only because it's a timeline, but because no one knew about that obscure report in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So it's not like he knew about this when he made this report. You know?
Sounds like the same guy, he just wore a different jacket.
Well, they reported the man as bald, They reported this
right.
guy as with hair, but maybe he didn't. Maybe his hair grew. I don't know.
Yeah, he's just like us.
So, needless to say, that night would change Woody's life forever.
Yeah.
He went home and told his wife, whose name was Kristen, everything. And while he was home, he was so scared he was shaking. He wanted to call the police, but he couldn't stop shaking. So his wife called the police instead, and handed him the phone. The police officer told him not to worry because you are one of many reports like this coming in tonight.
So this motherfucker visited a lot of people.
No, this was the only visitation, but there was reports of a cylindric or pill-shaped metal craft.
So it's flying around trying to find somebody.
Yeah. So
Woody.
the police believed him too because he had a very honorable reputation in the city. Like, he was an honest man. Yeah. Like, people knew him as a salesman. He wasn't like a shyster. Like, he came to your door, sold good products. He was your friend. People invited him in for tea. Like, they knew him.
Yeah, good old-fashioned salesman, not like the new shit.
Yeah, he was a real salesman because he sold real product, kind of, basically. Yeah. He had integrity. So the police were like, there's no reason not to believe this guy. Like, we know Woody,
Yeah.
So he went to work the next day. He'd recovered a little bit from what he could. And when he was at work, he was approached by a man working for WTAP-TV, which is the news station for Parkersburg. And they invited him to tell his story on the news and talk to the public about it, in which Woody agreed.
Ah, the big time. Nice.
So that day, after work, he went to the news station and was met by not only news people, but Sergeant Plum of the local police, Sergeant Van Devender of the state police, a reporter from Parkersburg Sentinel, and most importantly and interestingly, an Air Force sergeant, whose name is not recorded, and other officers from Dayton, Ohio. Now, if you don't know about Dayton, Ohio, and the Air Force Base there's a large Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, known as Wright-Patt Air Force Base.
Okay.
Wright-Patt Air Force Base is where it's believed we hold aliens.
Oh, neat.
Area 51 is known to be like either a decoy base or where they say technology, but they think in Wright-Patt Air Force Base is where they hold living alien people. In the conspiracy world, of course. And the Roswell craft wreckage was flown from Roswell, New Mexico to Dayton, Ohio. So that's kind of where this all spirals from. So that's interesting that they're there, of course.
Right.
He was talking to these people by the Air Force people, the police people, everyone. It was a big open discussion, and he was questioned, going over every detail of the day and night, and would from the call of the police until, from that night until he called the police. Everything was talked about from 2:30 p.m. until 6 p.m. So over 3 hours of interviewing him.
That's awesome. I'd love to watch that.
Yeah, I think you can. I think it's out there. I've seen it before, at least clips of this interview on television. But I don't know how much of it would be available now, but you might be able to find it. The Woody Derringer interview. There's a couple of them, too, from more recent than this. During this encounter, he learned of other reports that had come in because the police sergeant talked about it. Right. One of which was a young man reported on the same road that a bright light was above the ship, or above his car,
right,
emanating from a pill-like ship or cylindrical-like ship, is what he said. But I think it's agreed to be like the pill shape. But he said a cylindrical-like ship was shining a light down on his car, and the man got so scared he drove faster, and then it stopped following him. But there was another more interesting report, which I think is very important to the validity of Woody's story, which is a mother and daughter described a cylindrical ship seemingly flying off the road ahead of them with a car behind it, and the car drove off in front of them, and they stopped to look around and got back in their car and drove and kept going. That report was made on the same road where Woody was. So it seems like this mother and daughter saw this happen. Like they were almost watching this go down with the ship and Woody's car, and reported it that same night.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, because if he was on a highway, there'd be other cars on the road.
Yeah, so. And it's a slow highway in a slow area, but still, exactly, there is other cars. So
yeah, so somebody else literally saw them pull off.
Yeah, and this was all talked about on television that day. So he got home. He got out of there, got home, and when he got home, there was a massive crowd outside of his house, asking for them to hear his story and talk about that, which he happily obliged, and talked to this crowd until 2 a.m., saying he had to stop because he had to go to work in the morning. Everyone left, and he went inside and went to bed. So, on December 4th, the same year, 1966, another event happened. Woody would have his second contact with Mr. Cold. He was on his way home in the car, this time with a friend, when he felt a tingle in his forehead, and he recalled the feeling of exactly what happened before when he was stopped. And he was terrified and did not want to engage in this and tried to ignore it. But before long, he was talking to Cold in his head, and this time Cold would reveal information about himself, seemingly trying to calm Woody down, initially suggesting that he slow down and drive carefully, saying he's driving too fast. He kept saying that throughout this whole thing, slow down, like drive more carefully. And he told him that his ship's above him, watching him, because it wasn't dark enough out, he didn't want people to see it.
Right.
And he told Woody that he was from a planet called Lanulos, and that is in the Ganymede galaxy. If you want to look this up, that is not a real thing.
Right.
Ganymede's a planet that's a moon of Jupiter. It's not a galaxy.
Translation error, perhaps?
Yeah, or just what he said, maybe some weird confusion. It's hard to say. But he told him that his planet was practically the same as Earth. It had plants, animals, and natural biomes like ours does. He told him he had a wife and he was married. He was married to named Kimmy, and he had 2 sons, aged 8 and 11. He told him that Lanulos had 3 seasons: planting, harvesting, and cold. He said that his people lived to up to 175 years of Earth time, and he told him his first name was Indrid.
Cool name, first of all. Very cool.
So Indrid Cold is his name.
That's a dope fucking name. That's so cool.
It sounds wild, yeah. It sounds like not a real name, maybe, but
it's cool. Though.
Alien
like a
name.
Star Wars name.
Yeah, it does. He told him that he had to leave after saying this, and Woody was ready to answer ask a bunch of questions back, but he said he had to go, and when he's leaving, you might expect a strong shock that may hurt you. So Woody braced himself, and when he broke communication, he didn't feel up any pain or anything, but he did feel a surge of adrenaline. And he asked his co-worker in the passenger seat if he'd felt anything, and he said this whole time he felt a strange calm and a tension in his left pupil. So the coworker didn't hear any talking. He wasn't talked to, but he did feel something, and his head was feeling weird.
So, but he said he was calmed.
Yeah, he said he was calmed, but he did feel tension in his pupil, which is a common thing when talking about telepathy. And when Woody made this report, he had no idea what telepathy was. He had never heard that word before, probably. It's 1966, and he's a sewing machine salesman from the military.
He's literally just like an honorable guy. Like, I can kind of see why maybe this guy picked him. He's just like, he probably did some research on the guy before he just talked to him. Again, all within the lore of this whole thing.
Yeah, and he
worked
in Air Force, the Air Force Signal Corps before, so he wasn't like some weird, like scummy guy, you know?
Yeah.
But this encounter was different. He wouldn't tell anyone about this encounter, but he probably told his wife. But he didn't tell anyone outside like of his immediate circle, if he did anything, for a little while, until he did eventually tell it to NICAP. Do you know what NICAP is?
That sounds familiar.
It's the National Investigation Committee of Aerial Phenomenon.
I do know about this. I heard it in a news report not that long ago.
They're like the official government agency for UFO sightings. Like, that's who you report your sightings to. They all end up going there. They look into it, whatever, you know. Right. But eventually the story, through people probably working at NICAP leaking it, it did get sent to multiple papers, including the AP, the Associated Press, which would mean it got spread internationally. Yeah. And he began receiving phone calls and letters from all over the world.
Oh, shit.
Biggest of all, he would have crowds outside of his home looking for UFOs at night. All night. Well, every night.
That's annoying.
Yes. But here's the kicker. They kept coming back because they kept seeing them. There was constant blue lights being seen above his home or above the fields behind him, and it seems the bigger the crowd, the shorter the sighting was, and they would leave faster.
It was his buddy.
Very possible.
It was Mr. Cold trying to visit, but he was like, I can't hang out with my homie with all you guys around.
So this kept going on for a while, and they were pretty miserable at home. He has a 3-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son, so it was getting rough. But just after Christmas in 1966, probably around what day we are now, 1966, he was invited by a friend who was a security guard at a NASA base to go visit the base at Cocoa Beach and have a week stay and tour the facility.
That's fun.
Him and his wife wanted nothing more than to get away from it all, so of course they said yes. He got the time off work and went to the base, and he was given a very in-depth tour of the base and met with a man who only called himself, quote-unquote, Charlie, NASA's head guy.
Okay.
He would be brought to a room, questioned and interrogated at NASA for 5 days.
Oh my God! So that wasn't a fun.
Well, they left. It wasn't like they were locking him in there. He was allowed to walk around and leave, and he would go back and spend the night, I think, at the hotel with his wife. But he would be told to come back, and he would do it because he wanted to talk about this stuff. He wanted to go. He was very willing in all of this.
Yeah. I imagine at this point you would see these people as helpful as
and he wasn't trying to run, so they weren't doing anything aggressive. They weren't like keeping him here. They're just like, come back tomorrow, and he would.
They sound like the right kind of people.
And he would recall all these details of every encounter he's had, both encounters, what the tips were, back and forth. He would talk about as much as he could. At the end of the 5 days, he was told by Charlie, quote unquote, you told us nothing we didn't already know. And while this sounds like a very far-fetched thing to be this random sewing machine salesman with a UFO encounters to be invited to NASA at Cocoa Beach and talk to, it has since, especially recently in the last 20, 25 years, been confirmed by multiple sources, including former NASA employees who worked there, recounting that there was a strange man from West Virginia who was brought in and interrogated for 5 days, including from anything from janitors to scientists, all trustworthy sources. People have confirmed he was there.
That's pretty wild.
Including visitor logs with his signature. So he did visit. And when he returned home, he was tested by multiple psychiatrists, and he was confirmed to not be insane, not have any mental issues, and he was very stable. So that put some of that talk to rest. People were calling him crazy around town, and he officially was able to be like, no, I'm not. Like, here's
please stop saying this.
But one night he arrived home, and he saw cars parked as far as the eye could see, including men holding rifles and shotguns.
Jesus Christ.
Hiding out in the trees. And this was enough with him. He was so fed up. He called the police. The police showed up, chased everyone out. Hours later, they would show back up.
Oh, my
God. But during this time was when he would receive multiple visits of people from Lanulos. Now, there's a lot of stories, and all these stories of him going through this, and I could talk about it I could go over it for, it literally would take over an hour. So just to summarize basically what happened during this time, sometimes crafts would arise, sometimes people would just walk out of the field looking like Injured Cold, or Injured Cold himself would show up, be invited into the house, and he did give a description of feeling like he didn't have a choice. Almost like he always invited them in regardless. His wife has been interviewed meeting these people. She said she met these people. The kids met these people, saying they were very uncomfortable, and they would hardly ever speak, and they always had smiles going from ear to ear, and they didn't look like genuine smiles. They were kind of creepy, like Uncanny Valley level creepy.
Yeah.
And he even claimed that he was taken into a ship and brought to Lanulos as a guest when he disappeared for 3 months.
Oh, okay.
And then he showed back up, and his wife, of course, thought he was cheating on her and ran away with a mistress. He said, no, Indrid took me to Lanulos. Home life was getting weird. Something else was happening during this time as well. While people were leaving, and people were coming and going and hiding out, trying to catch any visitors or any UFO sightings and stuff, there was multiple reports of a nice-looking black car with blacked-out windows and no plates, always present, parked a little bit away from the house, 2 men in the car at all times, or they would leave the car wearing all black suits and hats to visit the home, sometimes being let inside by Woody. Or his wife would let them in.
Sorry, my first thought.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm learning your knowledge of the cryptid and paranormal world is low.
Yeah, I just kind of exist on the plane of reality. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think it's great because I think it's great to hear the shock value when I'm telling you these things and the things you don't know about.
I mean, again, I've been like following a lot of recent stories about these Navy and Air Force videos, not just from the United States military, but from other militaries from all over the world that have been like disclosed over the last year. That's basically like, it's basically people being like, yeah, no, this is not a
the Navy came out and officially made a statement saying they cannot confirm or deny they are not from this world, but they do not know what they are.
Yep. And it's like it's in and attached with like all of the firsthand accounts. Because if it was only like one story here and there and whatever, but it's like every single state and every single like area in this country has some kind of UFO story. I don't. Personally,
no, I don't either.
I had a lot of potential cryptid and ghost stories when we talked about those things, with that like creepy thing in the woods and all that. But which again to this day I think about ever since that episode, and I'm like, was that far? I keep it like,
in the back of your head.
Yeah. Oh my god, it's in my head. It's buried there. But now I'm so suspicious of everything. But no, with UFOs, it's just like. I've always kind of believed in UFOs, but like I've never, I shouldn't just say UFOs. I should say, like aliens, I guess, but like, and life on other planets. But
right.
This sounds like, I don't know, like, again, these things saying they mean no harm, yet, like you said, he didn't seem to have a choice in letting them in. You know what I mean? It's just like, so they kind of force their way in. And they
well, it seems like they speak telepathically as well, and maybe it's saying like telepathically open the door. He describes it as he heard his own voice, but he also says that they spoke out loud a few times. Like, they do speak, but it seems like they prefer to speak in the mind, and when they do, he hears his own voice speaking from their perspective.
I wonder if that's what telepathy is.
Yeah, again, there's no way to, we don't know. Like, I see that making sense. You just hear your own voice, but you know it's coming from them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah, no. I was talking to my therapist recently, and the thing she said, she's like, our dumb ape brains have not caught up to the both social and technological advances of our time. Like, our social ideas and ideologies are so far beyond what our brains can actually like juggle. Like,
yeah, it makes sense. We advance technology very fast. Doesn't mean our bodies keep up with it.
Exactly. We're only a few 3 generations ago. We did not have. The phone. Well, yeah. Well, from us, I guess.
The cell phone was very different.
Yeah. I'm talking about my great grandparents. You know what I mean? Like, or my
the phone. Yeah. I know. I don't know if I've told it on the Lords before, but there was a story I love telling people that when I was in elementary school, we had like a little assembly where a lady came to talk to us. It was an old lady, and she came out to the Los Angeles area in a covered wagon. In the year 1908, I think it was, is when they arrived. And now she lived through automobiles becoming prevalent, through 2 world wars, through aircrafts coming to prevalency, to electricity coming to prevalency, to internet, to cell phones, you know what I mean? Like, just going through that, like, that's a crazy.
Oh yeah, I actually think about that all the time, to be honest with you, because I'm very big into like current goings on in the United States, but to understand what's going on in 2021 in the United States, you kind of have to understand the last decade, 3, and then all the way up to like the last 100 years. And kind of we talked about it a little bit when we did that speed run of World War II, is that like a lot of what changed after World War II was the focus on our economy and the profiteering that could be made from war and stuff like that. So technology was a big part of that. I mean, they had to advance their technology more and more every single time. So
yeah, it's just there's multiple things that create these advent rushes of technology. Like, we created electricity, which then realized, we can create other things that we're using electricity, and then we created circuit boards, and then we created microchips. You know, just like and computing takes off like fucking crazy. That's just next thing, and then cell phones took off like crazy with microchips. You know, like
I remember
it's just
in college hearing this like math equation that's like if you like every year technology actually increases like 4 times the amount like as good as it was the year before. So like in next year in 2022, everything will be 4 times as good as it was like this previous year, as long as we keep advancing and as long as but people do because they just keep getting this funding because that's like so much money just goes into Silicon Valley. It's kind of actually a little ridiculous, and like it just goes into the researching of all this stuff. But that's what's also pretty amazing too is like all these people who are putting the research into this technology, they're not the ones who are necessarily seeing all of these crazy events happening. You know, it's always military technology, which is usually a little bit better than what we have access to. So,
so back to
West
Virginia, back to Woody. Where did I leave off with? Nice looking black car, as we were talking about. Those are outside. That we can forget about, but that was an important thing to know that those were seen outside. At this time, his 7-year-old son was being bullied at school for having the famous charlatan father who was lying for money, which I also like to point out at this point, no money has been gained by Woody.
Yeah.
He has gained actually nothing positive from this experience.
You'd be surprised at how often that happens.
His 3-year-old daughter at home was having horrible nightmares and often waking up and seeing Indrid Cold watching her sleep, or other visitors from Lanulos watching her sleep, or men in black suits that are 6 feet tall watching her sleep. And then she would hide under her covers and then look up and they would be gone, kind of thing.
Right.
So she was having a bad time. His wife was having panic attacks because she was at the center of attention. There's always people outside. So they quietly, through multiple nights, moved out. They basically snuck away into a cabin by the river. It was a small house, I should say. It was a real house. It had electricity and everything. By a river that was cheaper for 2 reasons. They were losing money. They were losing money a lot because Woody's clients were now coming. He was getting a large rush of clients at the store, but they only just wanted to talk to him about the encounter and not interested in purchasing sewing machines. They would take up all his time, and he basically lost his job because of how many people... Because of this story. Like, he told this story, lost his job, lost his house, moved into a small crappy house by a river, and they were away from people for about a week until they were found again because guess what led them there? Blue lights in the sky.
Oh, wow, really?
So people found them again by seeing the UFOs and going towards them, and sure enough, there was Woody and the family at their little cabin.
Oh, my God.
So
he should have talked to Mr. Cold and been like, hey, can you fucking turn the lights off when you fly over at least?
Yeah. Yeah, or like, can you give me like a couple $100 or something so I can pay the power bill because I'm jobless now.
Yeah, thanks for that, by the way.
So
Mr. creepy grin motherfucker.
Yeah, I'm assuming he had savings. Also, houses weren't as expensive, or living wasn't as expensive now or then as they were now, because he was able to leave. They left the river cottage to move to Vienna, West Virginia, not Italy, and they moved right in the middle of town. In like some kind of apartment condo situation because they thought, well, we can't have crowds around us. It's like we're in an apartment building, right?
Right.
But then they got a knock on their door.
Oh no!
And it was a German television crew.
Oh,
and this German television crew said that they were here making a documentary about all these sightings that's happening. You know, because this whole flap is there's still other sightings going on around the whole state. People are seeing these lights. People are seeing the same lights from the different angles farther away in different cities, kind of thing.
Right.
There's more Mothman encounters are happening in this time as well.
Meanwhile, there's Mothman.
Yeah, meanwhile, Mothman is happening. And the harassment wouldn't stop because Woody wouldn't stop catering to it. He told the story when they asked. He helped the documentary, which I don't even know if it ever came out, but he helped. He did talk to the interviews and the documentary crew. He would go out of his way to tell people when he would find a new job, he would tell his coworkers the story and everything. It just, he kept building this fervor around it because he wanted people to know about it.
Right.
And it got so bad that eventually his wife left him with the kids and moved to Cleveland.
Well, they probably, hopefully, had a little bit more of a peaceful time.
Yeah. After a few months, however, he also moved to Cleveland at the wife's invitation to try to work things out.
Well, that's nice of her.
And it fell apart, and they got officially divorced.
Well, at least they tried.
Yeah, they did. But, it just couldn't work. He was too into the Lanulo story and Injured Cold and everything. And then I'd like to point out, once he left his original home, he never had visitors again.
Wow.
They wouldn't visit him in the cities or anything. So he hadn't had any for a long time. And then he eventually moved away from Cleveland and he remarried when he still lived in Cleveland to a new wife, and then moved away, never revealing his location again.
Good for him.
But he would still tell the story through phone calls and visiting news stations. Eventually, in the late 80s, Woody would return and move back to Mineral Wells sometime around, I think it was 88, 89. Mineral Wells is the county he lived in.
Sure.
And he would pass away in 1990 at the age of 74 in Parkersburg.
Oh, well.
So that's the end of the story for Woody. There was a lot going on with him seeing these telepathic messages. Towards the end of his life, he did mention that he had multiple headaches. His head would get in severe pain. He was getting older. He got a bunch of scans. They didn't find anything wrong with his head. He would also have severe depression after in later years of his life, like really bad.
Right.
He never was considered suicidal or anything, but he did eventually. The cause of his death was just seen as like kind of being old and sickly. I mean, 74 is not that old, especially for 1990. But
if you're not taking care of yourself, you can fade away.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. He was so depressed he didn't take care of himself. His daughter wrote a book called My Life with Injured Cold. And she 100% believes everything he said. She recalls the meetings with Injured Cold. She remembers meeting, even though she was 3 years old, she does remember seeing the men come into the house.
Right.
And she talks a lot about the black cars outside, which is, do you remember how I did an episode a little while ago about Wendigos and Skinwalkers?
Of course.
And it was kind of about three things. This episode is also about three things. We talked about Mothman.
Right.
We talked about
creepy jacket guy. Yeah.
We talked about Injured Cold.
Yeah.
And the third one we're going to talk about is something you already mentioned, the Men in Black.
Nice.
So for people who don't know, the Men in Black are not a Happy Will Smith movie.
No, it's not.
The Men in
I
Black
did know a little bit about this actually.
The Men in Black come from a real deep and kind of fucked up situation, starting far back as 1947. The Men in Black coined the MIB by John Keel, who is actually the same author who would interview Woody and many other events such as them. He also wrote the famous book, The Mothman Prophecies. He is known for dramatizing things, so he's not the best source for like super historical stuff, but he does report facts he knows. But he talked about the Men in Black, mostly revolving this whole flap in 1966. So just for you guys who don't understand, the Men in Black are strangers dressed in black suits who often drive all black vehicles with blacked out windows and no license plates. They will show up and threaten UFO witnesses into silence, harass others who witness various paranormal events to keep them quiet about what they have seen, and they have been reported to show up and work out of the Appalachian Mountains. The first official sighting started in 1947 when a UFO sighting occurred, and the Men in Black showed up, threatening a man, saying, "If you speak about this to the public, we will find you and your life will be destroyed."
I mean, that makes a lot of sense because that's why this stuff's not talked about. Is because they're threatened.
Yeah, 100%. And in 1966, guess where there was heavy sightings of black vehicles with blacked out windows and no license plates?
Texas. West Virginia.
No, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, specifically.
Yeah.
Many, many sightings of these cars. Not so much the Men in Black, but the cars.
Okay, though. Let's be honest. With how many sightings that there were and how many people saw them at that point, it's just like the men. It's like, go home, guys. You can't now. Like, you can't bully an entire fucking town of people. Like, go home. It's over.
Well, I think the sightings are more like it's not like at the time. You know what I mean? It's when people recall and you'd be like, okay, you're right. I did kind of see that weird car the other day, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
And no one knew what the Men in Black was back then, of course.
Sure.
So common theories about the Men in Black is that they're government agents or shadow government agents is another theory. Basically working for powers we don't know exists that kind of rule the world, Illuminati kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I'm not a fan of. I'm not into that world. I don't like that.
It's too.
It gets too much into that weird QAnon level stuff that I'm not going to. I'm not going to go Alex Jones on. So here's another interesting thing about the Men in Black. And also, if you want to go to like YouTube and look up video clips of Men in Black being caught on security camera, they're out there. Yeah. There is multiple video sightings of the Men in Black.
Dude, I've seen completely blacked out cars, no license plates before. I've seen that. I've seen that in LA.
Yes, but here's the thing. It's not so much that cars as the agents that are hard to find sightings of. Them, because when they leave their car, they're always about being 6 feet tall.
I'm 6 feet tall.
They wear black suits. They wear black fedoras. Often under their fedoras, they don't have hair or eyebrows. They also, which is caught on camera, you can see videos of this, they walk a little weird, like their legs don't fit in their body. And here's the biggest kicker, they are often seen having grins reaching ear to ear.
Oh.
So you're starting to see some similarities between these descriptions of things, and now we're talking about the Men in Black being government agents. And if you remember the movie with Will Smith,
right?
It's about an organization called the Men in Black that work with aliens.
Right.
So it's a very common theory that these are aliens working with the government, or our government working with their government kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, that goes along with a lot of the theories of where, like, the only real reason why we as a human race haven't come into contact with any alien species is solely because we're genuinely not ready. Like, if aliens came down right now and were like, hey, you guys want to come up and join the galactic whatever? Like, because there might genuinely be this like Mass Effect type fucking ecosystem that they're just kind of like keeping an eye on us, being like, no, they're not ready yet. Like Star Trek style.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? That's been a theory kicked around for a long time now, and this could genuinely be one of those things where, like, yeah, the Men in Black existed because they're the ones who kind of maybe not decided, but they're the enforcers of they're not ready yet. Basically, that idea of we're not ready yet, and maybe we're at that point where we're almost ready, which is why people have been coming out and saying things. I mean, this was fucking hilarious, but when Donald Trump was running for president, he was joking but kind of serious about how he's like, no, I'm going to release the information on UFOs. And I remember even thinking, like, all right, that's like the one silver lining if he becomes president is like he's going to drop UFO shit and JFK stuff too, I remember. But he pussied out on both of those things.
Of course he did, yeah.
Yeah, of course he fucking did. But the idea that, to me, it's either somebody went to him and went, no, sir, you're not going to do that. Or he also read the UFO stuff and went, oh, I'm not fucking releasing that. Yeah. He did, because it didn't come out because of somebody's, either it was his decision because he's like, oh, fuck no. Or it was because somebody went to him and went, it's not about you, sir. It's not up to you.
Or a man in black showed up and said, what do you think happened to JFK?
Yeah, right. But although JFK had nothing to really do with that, he was more shot because of military. Anyway, cough CIA. Sorry.
He's coming back from the dead. No, he's not coming back from the dead. Everyone, stop.
Oh my god.
So we've talked about the Men in Black, kind of gone over what they are, and Injured Cold, Mothman. Now this is the final part where I'm going to start talking about my theories of what I think things could be, and of what people think things could be. So my personal theory is, assuming this is all real, my personal theory is I have a theory I want to believe and a theory I do believe. The theory I do believe it could be, if this is all real, is that Indrik Cold is a Man in Black. He is maybe a higher ranking Man in Black who is working with, he doesn't live on Earth maybe, and he kind of just is like a higher rank person who's able to do kind of what he wants.
Right. Like,
so he made contact because he's like, we need to do something about what's going on with all these UFOs showing up. Like, maybe it's not them. Like, maybe they're trying to contain this UFO experience going on. Like, there's another species getting involved, and they're like, we need to stop this. Like, we need this. We might need some humans' help. So they kind of started working with people, ended up not needing it. You know, maybe it was like a plan B situation he was working on.
You know what? Do you know, can I
Yeah.
and this for a second?
Yeah.
Like, to even kind of take a more innocent route, it could have very well been, you're right, like upper agent, like somebody who's very good with people. Because remember, at the very beginning on his first meeting, he was super adamant about meaning no harm. He kept reminding him over and over again to drive safe. Like, clearly he didn't want Woody to get hurt, whether it was for nefarious reasons or whatever. But it doesn't, like, what nefarious reasons could there be besides just trying to articulate an understanding? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
like... So this could have also been, in 1966, could have been the very first time that like an agent in Men in Black said, okay, let's see if humans can comprehend and are ready for this experience. Like, and let's take a high level agent who knows, you know, who studied humanity, because he probably studied the man and humanity in general. Or I don't know how telepathy works. Maybe he could learn the dude's history just by looking in his brain, which is wild. Like, but I don't know. But no, like, because it might not have been like a military operation necessarily, but it could have very well been simply just like, okay, are humans ready? Because at that point, 1966, think about the technological advances that have been going on at the time, including the start of the space race. Like, oh, this is around this time we didn't quite get there yet, but we already had things going on in space. So like that could be aliens' first signal. Oh, the humans made it to space. Should we check in? Let's go check in. You know what I mean? Like, let's go check in on the humans.
Yeah.
They're making it to space. And then they've been like, not quite ready yet. And then,
that, what you just said is actually what I listed as the first theory about what this is that it was a first attempt at first contact.
right.
And then it was pulled away from when they saw people's reaction to showing up with guns at his house and freaking him out and like destroying his life because of it.
Yeah, and they're like, okay.
It's like, oh, they're not ready. Another point to mention is that he was, which is another. This is why this is theory 2.
Right.
People believe is that he was kind of a watchdog agent for the Men in Black. Sorry, that's kind of like keeping an eye on people in general, like maybe all over the place. And Woody's the only person who actually had the balls to talk about it. But there's a line that Woody said that is the key to this, which is, why are you or Colt said, why are you frightened? Our country is not as powerful as yours.
Right.
So if you look at ufology, as they call it, and all the histories of UFO sightings and stuff, they started after the first nukes went off.
Yeah. Yes.
So it is possible, like you were saying, the space race gave interest. I think it's likely that the atomic bomb made interest, and maybe no other alien had ever made an atomic bomb before. And we stumbled upon this horribly destructive weapon, and they're like, "What the fuck is that?"
Yeah.
Kind of situation. Like this is not okay. Like, these monkeys with sticks now have weapons that can destroy us. Kind of situation. Like,
right.
Like, we don't know their situation. He said that we're not as powerful as you. So maybe like they don't have weapons like we do, but they're just kind of like a more scientific style. You know, that's another theory.
Well, that goes into a complete left turn here for a quick second, and I promise I'll tie it in. Is the ideas of in humanity and human enlightenment is the understanding that violence is only ever a necessity when life is at stake. So, like, in reality, and spoiler alert, everybody, most wars are meaningless. Like, most violence in a grand scale is very meaningless. Like, a lot of people don't really want to fight. Like, soldiers, as we talked about in like previous episodes, in like Verdun and World War II and stuff like that, soldiers don't want to fight necessarily. They don't really want to. They can get motivated to, you know what I mean? Like, seeing your friend die, that'll motivate you to fight. But like, they don't necessarily want to do it. It's not necessarily in the human thing. So like, but what we're capable of, when it comes to enlightenment and what we're capable of with our brains and our mind, like, that's what basically could lead us to the scientific advancement. And like, that's what would get us to focus on things like, you know, conservation of the ecosystems and conservations of like food and resources, and making sure that everyone's provided for. And like, this isn't a political statement. I know it sounds like it. I'm talking about literally like the ideas of, this is what like enlightenment is that like everyone's cared after in that regard. And once you are scientifically advanced enough, and like you add scientific advancements on top of that, I mean, then you get to these guys, basically these greening guys, you know what I mean? Like, where like they never had, or maybe they did hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years before us, but they didn't have the wars that we did. They didn't have the, like you mentioned, the monkeys with sticks. Now the monkeys have bombs. You know what I mean? Like they don't have that kind of evolutionary process. They weren't evolved like that. So like they may have been a species that genuinely were able to just like find peace in that regard and just build shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just advance. They strived for advancement, not power.
Exactly. Whereas like humanity's history, if you just look at it, is basically just one giant power struggle.
Yeah.
Really. So, and that's basically it, is that like if humanity can learn that the power struggle isn't the goal is just, progression and survival, then like that might be when, some kind of contact can happen, because we're not going to be trying to blow each other up necessarily anymore, but that's the theory of it. And again, this all ties into what we're talking about here with these, again, like we just said, like these species, they clearly have some kind of enlightenment that we don't have, because they don't have the military equipment that we do, yet they got to planet Earth. So like, and they can talk to us via telepathy when we are still using our voice boxes. And you know what I mean? Like technically, like what we're doing with our voices is such an evolved form of speech, but it still does damage to us. In like 40 years, I'm going to have really big problems with my voice because of how much I use it. Like that's a flaw in the human design. Telepathy can fix that. But we don't have that,
Unless telepathy wears our brains out. I guess we wouldn't know until it happened, until we know more about it, or if it happens.
You're right. I mean, like you said, when he was dying, he had incredible headaches.
Yeah.
And the doctor said nothing was wrong. So, or that could have been maybe their attempts at communicating with him before he passed away, but his brain was too weak to receive anything.
Yeah, that too.
I imagine mental fortitude has to do with it. When they first spoke to him, he was a relatively young man with children. He had a job, like that right there. That's a put together person.
Exactly. I mean? Yeah, he had he was living the American dream.
Exactly. So like they wouldn't talk to somebody like me. I'm miserable.
Yeah, I'm just a big dummy. They don't want to talk to me.
If they showed up, I'd be like, "Oh, you're here. All right. Well, fucking life is meaningless. Fuck it." I got us on the rat race trying to find money, and here you are with your goddamn creepy ass uncanny grin.
Yeah, I do like that theory. I like the idea that we have nukes and they don't, kind of thing, and they're kind of like, oh shit, like maybe we're the Klingons of our story. Like we're the orcs of our story that we write about. Yeah, like we're the aggressive ones.
There's a story that came out of, I think, Ukraine or Russia it was after World War II, so after we dropped the bomb, and it was about I think it was either at like an Air Force base of some kind or some nuclear base, but one day, it was a missile silo. It was a nuclear missile silo somewhere in Russia. I think it was during the Cold War, actually, where all of a sudden everything turned on and was armed completely.
Yes.
And everything was there were coordinates set. There were the countdown started, and nukes were like pointing all over like key places. They were like New York and like France and like and it was just like, but no one ordered this. There was no Russian military guy that was like, yeah, do this. So and they were all just like freaking out, trying to shut everything down, like shut it down. We're gonna end the world. We're gonna end the world. And then what happened was, according to some sort, actually a lot of people said this who were working at some of these stations. They were out. Some of them were outside too. They saw something floating up in the sky, and in the same moment, everything shut off at once, basically, and then the ship flew away, as if to say, like, this isn't it. What you guys are doing right here isn't it. Like,
there's a similar story where they tried to launch a nuke in space.
Oh.
Do you know that one?
No, I don't know
They
that
sent
one.
a nuclear fission rocket out into space to test it and see how like it would work, like what would happen around the area, and it just shut off when a light was seen being near the ship.
That's fucking crazy. Yeah, but exactly. So like clearly they might not have the technology to make boom boom, but they have the technology to shut it off.
Yeah.
Like to control electricity, because electricity is pretty primitive, I guess, at this point. But like nuclear fission, let's pat our scientists on the back. The Manhattan Project was pretty fucking groundbreaking.
Yeah, like it's very possible that while we're not advanced in every way, we took some weird path in our evolutionary and technological advancements that took us down this extreme of like
Yeah.
splitting
Oh,
an atom.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And you know what's crazy now? In 2021, we have, I forget what it's called. It's like thermine or something like that, nuclear, which is cannot be converted into weapons, by the way. And it can actually be a self-sustaining, like, people need to start thinking about nuclear again. I know people are like solar and wind a lot, and that's all great and good.
Oh, I am so with you, and I'm such a big advocate for nuclear power.
Nuclear power is the future. It is, and it is cleaner. It's not Chernobyl, guys.
It's clean. Yeah, no, people don't understand. People they mix it up with like radioactive leaks and stuff like that. Like, yes, shitty things can happen, you know, and the bombs exist, but that's not what it's about. That's not. Yeah. It's a clean energy source.
It's made completely different. And
anyway,
again,
I'm not
there's
here.
systems, but go ahead.
I'm here to talk about clean energy. I'm here to talk about creepy alien things, and I want to talk about now the next theory. I'm going to focus on to keep going through this, because this is an interesting one. People think that the MIB, the Men in Black, are actually just Lanulosians. Like, that's like it's the same people, and they're working with our government very closely to keep everything in check, in exactly what we just talked about, turning the nukes off. Right. There was a story in 1967 in Mexico. 2 men were abducted by aliens, and they claimed that they were taken to Lanulos.
Oh, okay.
They claimed that the men in the ship said they were going to Lanulos to take a look at you, and they were going to bring you back home, and no harm will happen. And they were missing for 4 days, and they were found near where they went missing. They're clean. Their clothes weren't dirty. Their shoes weren't dirty. They looked like they were taken care of, as if they never left.
Right.
After 4 days of being missing. So
cool.
Weird. When they were interviewed, they dropped the name Lanulos. This, of course, got back to people in America. Did they just make all this up because of the stories being told by Woody? It's possible if it reached them. They claimed they never talked about it. So that's, I don't know. You know, that's a theory. But the theory is that because they brought that up, that this Ganymede galaxy and maybe even the name Lanulos are just made up by the MIB to kind of like just say something. It's like their go-to words.
Yeah, they're just kind of like the code words instead of the real things. So like Lanulos might be code word for the actual planet.
Exactly. You know, like so they're not going to give us real names in case somehow that were to come up somewhere.
Hey, who knows? They got to keep their own safety in mind for sure.
So we've talked about these 3 things, but the first one we talked about hasn't been brought up again, which is Mothman, and where the hell Mothman fits into any of this.
Yeah, I have been thinking about that.
So my favorite theory is that Indrid Cold is an intergalactic bounty hunter chasing Mothman.
Oh my god.
Now, of course, I love this theory because Star Wars, but also, like, maybe because he showed up, like, a week after the Mothman sighting.
Right.
And it's, like, asking about how people live. Like, and then the Men in Black shortly after were sighted around Point Pleasant near the Mothman sightings. So, like, maybe Mothman is a creature from their planet or a different alien species. And they're like, we need to get this thing. We need to get this thing off the fucking world, kind of thing. Like, it shouldn't be here. Right. Mothman also just like stopped showing up. You know. After this. So in 1967, there's been like almost no Mothman sightings since, and most of the ones that have are super fake or bogus. And like you look at it, and you're like, okay, shut the fuck up, kind of thing. Right. Yeah. Like, people blame, which I'll talk about more in the Mothman episode I'll do, but they blame 9/11 on Mothman.
Oh my god.
They say there were sightings of Mothman before 9/11. Some people think of Mothman as an omen to things.
Okay.
So I guess I'll just say this real quick because you don't know the story of Mothman. What happened in that year at Point Pleasant, West Virginia, is he was sighted everywhere. People kept seeing him. He chased people around. He was seen on a bridge, and then the next day, this bridge collapses and kills a fuck ton of people.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
And this is a bridge that was like a major bridge from Point Pleasant to like Richmond, like major, it's a huge connection to like other big cities. I don't think Richmond's the right name, but this bridge collapsed in the middle of Christmas traffic. So there was a lot of horrible deaths happened when all these fucking cars and bridge and debris tumbled into a river full of families going home for Christmas. And people think Mothman was like the portent of doom, kind of, because bad things happen after Mothman sightings. There's even World War I Mothman sightings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a couple, mostly Turkish too. But anyway, so maybe Mothman is just a species of alien, and they don't want them around. Like, these things need to stop being on Earth, so these specialists like Indrid Cold get called into play. to take him out. Maybe the sighting that the two kids saw in New Jersey was Indrid Cold. Maybe he didn't have a wig on, or maybe he did grow hair fast, or maybe it was another person who showed up when Mothman did before we knew Mothman was here, kind of thing. You know, like they tracked it here, kind of situation.
And they were trying to see if they could find him before.
Exactly, like he was just out there looking around. Like there's so many weird things about this, and the Men in Black kind of showing up around Point Pleasant, almost like they're chasing the Mothman. So I love the theory that Indrid Cold is just a fucking bounty hunter. It's hilarious.
I mean, the funniest thing, though, that makes probably the most sense is that, like, Mothman shows up, starts terrorizing the neighborhood, mysterious figures show up, everything goes away all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. Like Mothman kind of, like, went away.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, like, and look, it is so easy to manipulate, like, mainstream media into saying, like, all you have to do is go to one journalist and go, that sounds fucking crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then it's over. Like,
yeah.
You know, and then all CNN has to do is go, this fucking crackpot, you know, and then no one's going to believe it.
Yeah. And it's
so
just
easy to cover that shit up.
Exactly. Media can switch one way or the other, stop talking about things, go completely crazy. Mothman is a very crazy story when we get into that. The sightings, like I said earlier, starting back in the fucking I think actually ancient like Native American. There's like drawings of Mothman stuff.
Oh, so that's why it's cryptid style. Okay.
Yeah, so it goes back super far. But again, it still could be an alien coming to Earth through ways we don't know.
Do you think maybe that even skinwalkers and
absolutely? I mean, I think so many. I think ghosts could be aliens, dude. Like, there's so many different things that aliens could explain. Different species out there. It's a giant galaxy.
It actually makes the most sense that most things that we see that are unexplainable are probably just things from other like planets and galaxies that are just like here for a second. Or or maybe again, like Wendigos, there might be like a small amount of them that crash landed here a long time ago or some shit. You know, I mean, because like they don't seem like intelligent.
Yeah, same with Mothman.
Yeah, because these things though they don't seem intelligent enough to travel on their own. That's what the thing that they seem like they're wild and crazy. Because like a Wendigo, you know, although maybe not, because Wendigos fold your clothes and put them out for you. I guess after they eat you. But and also skinwalkers can talk to you.
The thing about the Mothman sightings are now, it's like after this event, it's almost like once they're sighted, they're reported or like photos are taken of them, whatever, and they're never seen again. So maybe it is these guys showing up and just zapping it or capturing it and taking it back to their planet or whatever. Or maybe they're just there. Maybe they're a very dangerous, invasive species that they have to like stay on top of to make sure we don't get destroyed by them, kind of thing.
Yeah, if like two Mothmen meet and bang, and they literally make thousands of moth babies.
Yeah, maybe Mothman's like some kind of like StarCraft Zerg style like horrible monster race. It just kind of like you gotta nip it in the bud before it starts, kind of thing.
Look, here I'm gonna just throw the idea. We're streaming on the internet right now. This is live. You know, if there are any of these folks listening right now, whether they're on their planet or here, here's the plan. We got to come up with a plan to get you guys to introduce yourselves where human beings won't freak the fuck out. You got to talk to a well-balanced, and this is probably going to be the hardest thing, celebrity. Get a level-headed, famous person. Because then you can get invited on stage or something like that in front of people. And you got to make a big entrance, but you got to make it more cozy. What?
The Pope.
Oh my God, that would melt. I don't know about the Pope.
I think that would destroy two people's minds. But imagine the Pope walks out one day and he's like, "And here's my famous guest, Indrid Cold."
Yeah, he's just like, and Indrid Cold's just like, he like threw everyone's minds, just like, "Hey, everyone,
good evening, planet Earth."
Yeah, good. Yeah. Also, can you do telepathy with more than one brain at a time? I wonder. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. It's interesting. That's an interesting idea.
You cannot, Mr. Cold, if you're out there, stop showing up on one-on-one meetings. You're just going to scare the shit out of somebody, and it's going to make them sound crazy. If you want humans to, you got to let us catch up, you know? You got to give us a little treat. You guys did it back in the day with fucking other resources, you know?
Yeah, so that's basically the bounty hunter story was the end of my thing. But I do want to put in, just for my own opinion, that I think I kind of believe this story. And the only reason why I kind of believe the Indrid Cold story is because Woody lost fucking everything.
Right.
His life was torn to shreds. He lost his family. He lost his wife. His kids wouldn't talk to him. He lost his job. He had to move away to an unknown location. He wrote a book about it in 1971, the one I read for this, Visitors from Manulos. It didn't make a fucking dollar. Like, it did nothing. Like, I think he tried, that was his attempt to try to get something out of it. John Keel, the famous author who wrote the Mothman Prophecies, talked to him about it, but he took the credit basically for all the interviewing stuff and writing because he did do all the work, to be fair. So, like, he didn't get much. He didn't get, like, anything out of this. He just lost in all sides. He lost everything, like I said. So it's like, why would you go through all this?
Yeah.
Especially...
the truth.
Especially when you talk to multiple government agencies and then multiple people, psychiatrists, saying you're okay.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's when everybody's telling you you're okay, you know, and but no one's listening to you. I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. Sorry. And
then it's just like also like and like I said, no one knows about the story. Indrid Cold is a name that faded super into obscurity.
What if you type it in on Google? Like
if you type it on Indrid Cold, you're gonna come up with a lot of stuff about Mothman. And a lot of stuff about the Mothman properties. INDRID.
INDR.
Cold.
ID. Oh, yeah. Indrid Cold. Taz? What does that mean?
I don't know.
Indrid Cold Taz is like the first thing that comes up. Yeah, cryptid. Indrid Cold, commonly known as the Smiling Man, is an allegedly humanoid entity. His name comes from his tendency to smile at those who encounter him. Because smiling, look, I understand why they smile. It makes a lot. Oh God, the fucking depictions of him are horrifying.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah, one of them just looks like the Joker, but
yeah,
but no, like I understand, like, because that's what humans do when they're happy. They smile at each other. So he wants to, you know, be like, try to give. But the problem is, again, we have Uncanny Valley stuff going on. So, like I said, you can't do the one-on-one meetings. Again, we have to come up with a method for these guys. I'm sick and tired of the world as we know it. I would love us to get integrated into some galactic shit. I don't know if I'm ready for it, but not a one-on-one meeting. Because he's right. My brain would melt.
The smiling thing does make sense. Like you're saying, they're trying to be friendly. Like, oh, these people smile to show friendship. Let's smile. And then it turns out looking like a creepy murderer. So
exactly. Although, again, he probably shouldn't have tried to approach kids the first time they showed up. Because there was those two kids in New Jersey. Although
the kids approached him.
Oh, that's true.
And I think it looked like he might have just been looking for something. The other thing about the bounty hunter theory, if you remember, he says, I am a searcher.
Yes.
That's what he told him. So, like, what the fuck is a searcher? Does that mean he's searching for Mothman? Like, is he looking for this thing and he never got to actually ask about it because he didn't, like, know? Maybe he was asking around, like, oh, if we kind of see Mothman, like, if we see this thing show up.
It does give me comfort to know that, like, you know, if again, all these things are taken as fact, like, there are aliens out there and they know of us and they're kind of looking out for us a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a little bit, like I this sounds kind of silly, but, like, I have a little bit of comfort being like, if North Korea tries to nuke us, they're just going to be like, nah, man. Like,
or hopefully if a giant asteroid comes our way, they'll be like, let's just push it.
Well, if you saw the recent movie about that, actually, by the way, I thought it was great. It was pretty funny. But
which one? There's a couple.
Don't Look Up.
Oh, Don't Look Up? I didn't watch that.
Oh, it's pretty good. I thought. I mean, again, it's a depressing ending, but it's a pretty funny movie. Otherwise, it's pretty good. But that's actually something they talk about as the plan to, like, if an asteroid comes hurtling at our planet. We actually do have a plan already. That's launching a bunch of nukes at it.
They're testing. SpaceX is doing a big thing right now where they're testing a rocket launch to hit one and knock it off course. It's not coming towards us now, but they're trying to, like, knock one off course to see if we can. Basically,
yeah. Watch, that one's gonna fucking.
It's gonna now turn right back towards us.
Yeah, God damn it, Elon, you son of a bitch. That's okay. Then we'll launch, like, the 16 nukes at it and just turn it into dust. But that's the idea. But generally speaking, the plan. So we were okay there. But again, unless we have our friends out there who are like, we have powers that can easily deter asteroids. You know, like, we got technology.
Yeah,
that
they're giving us some shields,
explosives. Yeah, exactly. Some magnetized thing or some gravity wells. Because that's what I like. Because one of the things that I'm thinking about is, like, I think the technology, we got to figure out the math behind gravity more and, like, gravitational pulls. Because if we can make something so dense that it can create gravity, we can do a lot of stuff with that. Just something to think about. Something to think about.
But yeah,
not magnets though.
We don't know how they work, so.
Yeah, magnets. What the fuck are they?
According to a certain band. That's everything for today's episode in the 66 Flap. What do you think? What's your overall thought about this flap of UFO sightings?
I mean, I've always wanted to believe in UFOs. I remember when I was in high school, I wrote it was like a history final in my junior year. I wrote about Roswell, New Mexico, and I wrote about UFOs and aliens because I was convinced that like UFOs were real and aliens were real and all this stuff was real. So I was like, I'm going to do a deep dive and look into it. And I only specifically looked into Roswell, New Mexico. There were related stories and I remember even looking at them and maybe even that came up. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Maybe even West Virginia was talked about, but that's not what I was talking about. I knew about the reputation of Roswell. So I dove into it and I remember looking at like basically what you said was like the only thing that was ever potentially anything was that they may have moved alien technology from there to somewhere else. And I didn't even remember it was Ohio. Like,
yeah,
so it was one of the, and I remember like when I gave the presentation and I handed in the paper and everything, I was actually like really fucking depressed because my conclusion was that there weren't any aliens. But it was that there weren't any aliens at Roswell necessarily. And again, there might still have been. So like at some point.
Yeah, I might do an episode one day on Wright Pat Air Force Base, but more likely I'm going to do one on that specific crash incident because it gets fucking insane. There is some wild stories. The Shilluminati podcast did an episode on it, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know this much stuff was known about everything going down there and how fucking weird and like sus it is.
Wild.
Like,
I mean, what's nice about the last like 50 years is we've had so many movies about aliens that's like it's kind of like making humans ready for it. You know,
100%.
Like I've totally thought about, and I'm sure you have too. Is that like that's why I love a game like Mass Effect so much because I remember playing through Mass Effect. When you're just like walking around on the Citadel, like completely unrelated to Reapers and the invasion and the story or plot, it feels like a genuinely lived in world where you're like, yeah, this is an actual place with an economy. And like, these are people getting like, it almost feels like this is exactly what's supposed to happen. Like Mass Effect almost feels like, yeah, this is us in 1,000 years. You know what I mean? Like basically. Yeah. And what I love about, and we can do a Mass Effect Lore Lords. Actually, I intend to do a Mass Effect Lore Lords, but like and specifically talking about the First Contact War because it's so fascinating with like the Turians meeting the humans and basically like fighting each other until the other races were like, knock it off. You know what I mean? The other species were like, humans are new. Come on, let's rise them up. Let's just not try to nuke them. And then Turians are like, man, thinking me, but like, they're crab people. So Garrus is a hunky, massive.
They're metal raptor people.
They're so cool though. But anyway, obviously that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about humanoid.
A real UFO flap that happened.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about a real one, but that's kind of again. I feel like it wouldn't. I don't know why. I think human beings, because we are the monkey brains, we assume every interaction is going to be violent. But I just don't think it's going to be. I think if we have a first interaction with aliens, and I mean it on a mass scale, not just like these one-on-one interactions that need to stop, Mr. Cold. I mean it. I'm just gonna be talking to Mr. Cold every now and again on stream. Like, Mr. Cold, no more one-on-one interactions. You gotta just make a big announcement. Maybe not you. Maybe find somebody more personable. I don't know. Who knows how to smile? That's a little less creepy. But like, give it a shot. Yeah, like it's. I think that we're the ones who make things violent. I don't necessarily think that other species of alien would actually want to do that, unless there may be something like the Flood, or the creatures that you played in Stellaris that one time we used to
the spider monsters, or maybe creatures like, I don't know, Mothman.
Like Mothman, exactly. So yeah, and they have other ways of handling these species as opposed to just killing them, blowing them up. But anyway, yeah, that's my last thoughts, I guess. This was fun. I love these types of things. Anything that takes place in reality but it can't be explained, I'm all about. So like the Seti stuff with ancient Egypt is all spiritual and I love it. The cryptid stuff, this stuff, I'm so all about it. I'm just obsessed with it.
I'm obsessed with it in real life. Yeah. So this is like my probably gonna, most of my episodes are probably gonna be this style of thing.
That's fine. It's fine. I can talk about video games. And
just because this is like so. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
Well, that's what you get here. This is why Lore Lords is great because we go from everywhere between history to this wacky, mysterious, spiritual stuff to you want to talk about Zelda for an hour and a half? Yeah, let's do it.
The topic is having no topic, and that's the best part. You don't know what to expect week to week.
Yeah, and having at least 80% of the what we're telling you being accurate.
So yeah, like this episode for me is like the Verdun episode, where this episode I read an entire book. I went through encyclopedia articles. Verdun, I read an entire book, and like everything I'm doing is literally just facts that I copy pasted from other information. This is all like accurate.
No, one of the reasons why I actually want to do a Lore Lords on like the last 40 years of America is because I read a book about our economy and how it was shaped in the last 40 years, and my brain was like, "Oh my God, we're fucking everything up."
Or,
and I want to do that eventually.
Or a Lore Lords on sugar. Anyway, that is tonight's Lore Lords episode. That was episode 14 about the flap, 66 flap. I hope everyone liked it.
I loved it.
It's one of my, like I said, this was the story that I read during like when I think I was like 18, 19 that got me into this kind of stuff, like really into it. So.
This would have gotten me into it too. So anyway, thank you again, guys. I appreciate y'all. We'll do some post show in a minute, and then I'll be popping on the stream. I have no fucking idea what I want to play right now. But so thanks again.